Welcome to the Total Wireless Store, where total confidence awaits.
Music powers my morning runs, but data overages slow me down.
Don't worry, you got this with the Total Wireless Store. Just bring your number and get 10 gigs of lightning-fast 4G LTE data with unlimited talk and text for $40 a month.
I'd run to the Total Wireless Store right now for that deal, if I wasn't already here.
Data girl.
Discover the Total Wireless Stores and get total confidence. The latest phones, the best network, all at great prices. Excludes TracFone Wireless Inc. brand sports. $40 plan must remain active to keep bonus data after 12/31/18. Terms at stores.totalwireless.com.
He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stargate, the Cosmos on Revolution Radio at revolution.radio. And I'm your host, Janet Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha. Alex Lesson, Chemist Drella, is not going to be with us tonight. That's another co-host. But we have an incredible guest, Aug Tellez, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Aug in just a minute here. You want to say hi, Sasha?
Hi, Sasha.
Hi, sweetheart. Hi. I don't know if you got to, I put up a bunch of stuff I grabbed from the internet about Aug Tellez, but I saw a couple of his YouTubes, and this is someone to pay attention to. So let me, I didn't give an official bio, but I got this. I'll read it to you. This is a personal testimony of the experiences that go beyond the mundane limitations of mainstream, quote, reality. Everything he published here on this site is based on personal direct experiences in the course of his present life. And he also had experience in the course of many lives as a result of his participation in the secret projects. Getting some background noise. I was shown many things by those who work behind the scenes. The unveiling in a series of events brought about by the necessity and capacity of the human race and this civilization to come to the awareness of the true nature of the corruption of power, as well as the reality of the soul. Many people are here to help perform this task. They are ex-operatives, researchers, healers, travelers, scientists, and so on. And Aug is here to assist in informing the public of the unveiling. So we're going to talk about DUMBs, or deep underground military bases, USAP projects. We'll have to, Aug will tell us about that. These projects range from military abductions, biolabs, genetic engineering, experiments, cloning, mind control, trauma-based torture, mind control to development and research of advanced travel, energy, and the development of zero-point energy devices which can transfer the consciousness of a living human being into a cloned body. Excuse me, soul transfer, programming the mind and the reality of the soul, solar warden, the great shift, cloning centers, supercomputers, sentience and human rights, celebrity cloning. Anyway, I have all this stuff up on AquarianRadio.com, and the list goes on and on. This is from one of the sites. We're talking about Team Light, Team Dark, breakaway civilizations, and rogue military factions, underground bases, I said before. But one thing I wanted to say, where is that? I saw real quick. Something about Aug is a clone. So we're going to be talking about all this and more. Anything you want to add, Sasha, before we bring on Aug Tellez?
Hey, no, I've just wrapped. Tell us who you are and you know what your trip is and what you got to share. What's hot, man?
So welcome to the show, Aug. I was recommended to you by a friend. So when I get these recommendations, they say, go look up this person. I pay attention. So welcome to our show. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Hi, am I unmuted?
You are unmuted and you are talking, yes.
Cool, you unmuted.
Hi, aloha.
Hi, how are you doing? Thank you for the introduction, and please let me know if I should back my mic up or if it's not close enough.
I think you're sounding good right now. Ahmad, how's he sound to you?
Oh, he's great.
Okay, thank you.
We're all sounding good. So everything that you have here and then some, I know you have a lot of YouTubes. This will take us all year to cover. But let's cover what we can tonight. We'll probably have you back again. Can you tell us your story? Like who you are, how you woke up to the awareness of who you are as a soul or as a person of interest in the whatever this is, the secret space program, whatever you call it. Do you want to kind of give us a rundown for about 15, 20 minutes here, and then we will ask you questions, okay?
Yeah, I could try and do that. There's a little bit of interference on your line, or maybe it's just mine. I'm not sure. It just sounds a little bit like static.
It might be mine. I'm going to turn off the fan. Hold on. Okay, go ahead, talk. I'm just going to turn off some fans. That usually makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
Wasn't too important. And you can see... Okay, that was all right. There, you know, or you could also mute. You can see if you want to keep the fan on, but you can see going through the outlines that there's many topics here, and there's many ways to look at it, and it's kind of impossible to get it done in one sitting or anything like that. There's a couple ideas. So, as far as the SSP or the way you put it, like whatever is going on and whatever this is, and the soul and origins and things like that. I try not to get too deep into that because it gets pretty fantastical and then the issue with the nature of space and time and consciousness and what we could refer to as planets or other planes or frequencies or however that's going to work out. I don't have it, down packed entirely, and so I can only pretty much theorize in terms of what people often will talk about as far as, where they're from, their origins, or anything like that. Although I do have a story behind that, I just don't really say it too much publicly. As far as my...
Okay. Let me just interject into that. I'm okay with the fantastical. I am a Aquarian, and I'm known to get hippy-dippy, airy-fairy at times. I like to build to it, though, so if we can... And I'm a very logical person. I have a Spock side, so... I find that if we can build some logic...
I concur.
Go ahead.
I totally concur. It's like the fantastical, or whatever you're saying that you're afraid you'll blow our minds with, is just what we're most interested in, man. So let us have it.
I understand, and I try and stay away from it for various reasons. I do. It is basically the pinnacle, but it's so varied. And so specifics, what I can do is specifics, I kind of will stay away from. We've seen things about so-called, the Pleiadians, yet this is related to cloning projects that have exchange programs with what are viewed as different realities, worlds, planes. We're going to look at it as parallels. And it's a military force that was put together for a previous timeline that basically created or was part of a coalition to try and prevent what happened in that timeline to this timeline. Yet that could all be a story, just designed through cloning and having people that look differently. So
it explains things, though. It works. It explains things.
It begins to, and then as one goes, there are layers, and it's like an onion. And if you can, if you go one way or the other, you can kind of basically just going in circles. And there is a basis to it about developing what you know based upon what you experience, pretty much concretely. Although the whole point of the mind is beyond that. What I was saying at first, as far as the staying away from those things is because there's a whole other aspect of, the way to look at the situation. And it's kind of like that aspect is from the outside looking in, seeing, multiple races and different times and spaces, and kind of trying to get the bigger picture. But there has to be a linear history that describes how these events, how those with beings, events interacting with that, a larger society or civilization, a breakaway, so on, shaped this version of history. And the evidence, the translation of those influences in our daily lives and our when that ties together completely, then you get to the soul unveiling and your true purpose and your true memories and doing what you're here to do, because it's something that guides you based upon feeling and not being conforming to regulations or something like that, which goes basically hand in hand into this whole system that we're kind of looking at, as far as whether something is kind of objectively conforming the entire species into a new form of life and consciousness that basically suits some ulterior motive, or that and maybe a natural progression, or some combination of both, kind of like we're in this the situation where we have to decide our fate, if you will. And it's kind of even, skipping out on trying to introduce my particular situation, which I did a little bit in the previous episode, or the previous interview radio show with Frank. It was called The Farm in the title. You can find that. And I talked a little bit into that. But in passing those kinds of concepts up, seeing just how, these kind of vague outlines of a control system, and our species, whether it's evolution and the origins, planet, space-time, that's the paradigm we're in. That's the matrix that we don't really know. And now there's this web of entanglement of what basically becomes deception of those in the know with knowledge of experiences, experiments, technology, things like that, power, royalty, and so on. And I'll conclude this right here, but I've been chatting a lot lately. And the tie is basically, is it really such a situation that is this matrix of control system, that is so powerful, or is it something that we're generating based upon manipulation, mental manipulation from people in society that are using us to kind of create this self-fulfilling prophecy of a downward spiral, or a self-projecting cage, like a restraint? And we don't realize it, but we're being used to create it for ourselves.
And are we all the above? Or
well, ultimately,
the entire continuum. Yeah.
It's everything is basically happening. Ultimately, the farther you go, the more you realize that's what it is, because we've been here for a very long time, and all the options have been satisfied in order to find every particular desire or function for any particular technology or capacity. And there's potentially temporal resets, or these, like temporal quakes that have happened in our past, kind of looking at it just like there was a great volcano or a great earthquake in, some of our ancestors' past. Mm-hmm. Well, we had some type of quantum event that pretty much knocked everybody's consciousness out of sync with nature and their ancestors, their previous continuity of consciousness, and it's created this cosmic abandonment, bipolarity, war-based duality, scarcity, separatism consciousness, which is started with a transcendence of higher awareness. So it's paradoxical in the sense, which is it results in a world that's paradoxical, where we have all the resources, right, and opportunities to live the way we should or even want, but a few basically see more benefit in their doing it, their way. And as well, though, the whole system has to agree to do that, otherwise it doesn't work. If all of people, or the majority, didn't agree to this, it wouldn't be working, wouldn't be happening. And that's part of, I'm rambling here, but there's so many angles of looking at the situation that is literally, it requires a mind, body, spirit renaissance of self-awareness.
So how about we slow it down? We've got people out there who have no idea what we've just said. We want to blow their mind already. Yeah, let me finish this thought, and then you can take your thought. Let's break this down into its pieces, because I think you and Sasha and I and Matt can talk on a quantum level, but this is a whole new audience, so it doesn't matter what you have out there before. I'm sure this will spark people's interest, and they'll go and look at a lot of your YouTubes. Some people just aren't going to get it because if they catch the wrong one, it's like coming into the middle of a movie that's, already been. So I recommend we start maybe on the human level about what happened to you that you woke up, became so conscious and aware of the continuum and the totality of existence and the matrix, however you want to label it. Sasha, what did you want to say? Go ahead.
Yeah, I really dig what you're saying. For me, the interesting thing is that you dichotomize between the between other, that have we not created the situations that we're now being challenged with for our own growth, and isn't it just perfect is another way to look at it too, because it's forcing us to get the overview and transcend that dichotomization. That's what I think.
Thank you.
So back to you, Aug. How did this start for you? You were born, what, in 1977? What was it, July 7th or something like that?
A little bit later. It happened.
97. I got mixed up with some other people's bios, so go ahead.
I got involved directly at the age of 9. I've been having a lot of chats. I've been recording some of them, but they come out. And I said before, I wasn't trying to cut in before. I said I've been drinking a lot of coffee, and I have another cup right here. It's probably a bad idea. But
It's okay.
And when I build up from like not speaking for a while through these kind of means, it kind of happens. And so let me see where I was. I'm writing notes down just a little bit.
Right.
Well, I guess
you said on your site you were cloned. So how did you become aware that you were cloned?
Well, that's part of it. So first, before all that, there are, to skip it ahead, basically, I noticed things from looking at, the control system that's around as a kid. And instead of looking only into me, you can also look into celebrity cloning, because that'll begin to get everything in the secret space program, which is highly, propagandized, if you will. Everything really is. But so I, as a kid, I would read a lot of books. I remember in elementary school, I read all the dinosaur books and the history and geology. I was getting into all that stuff. Real weird. And so ultimately I had real weird thoughts, and consciousness, life and death, the mysteries that science can't understand, the answers that were given that are mostly deception, whether it's about money, religion, or power, our state of being between animals and mind, and consciousness and humanity, self-awareness, the power of money and the corruption, the true history of accounting, the history of the occult, the symbolism behind knowledge in itself and the universe as a universal language merging with the subconscious, the nature of quantum theory, which I didn't know was quantum theory at the time. It's just magic or whatever. And physics, if you get into a little bit of what you can understand through the simple concepts of physics, Cartesian physics, space-time, and then eternity, just the concept of that. When I was young, I focused on those things. I read about those things, and this was before the age of 10. So I was a little... But now here's why. So certain people have these abilities, and I would always get weird events, whether it was synchronicities, or I literally hear somebody's thoughts, or I, accidentally influence something. Weird stuff goes on. I had that forever. And, a lot of it is love-based. It's emotional telepathy, if you will, or pure feeling. And so then I got picked up after, I told this in the Frank one, so I won't go into it. The last one, people can look into.
Well, this is a whole new audience. So if you can kind of summarize things, that would give us a foundation of what you're talking about.
I'll summarize, but the deeper, semi-full explanations in the previous interview, they have technology that attracts the mind of people who are adepts and can see that type of energy, and eventually in a dream they'll end up there. And so that's what happened in the first time. I kind of, it was like I was guiding myself there. I felt the gravel under my feet, and it's the first time in a dream you feel the texture that you don't really get those details, and when you're in your mind. And 2 soldiers saw me, somehow could see me. First they didn't give chase. I kind of left, and I kind of stuck around for a second, in the vicinity. Then they chased me. For a second, I couldn't, you kind of scream inside your head, and you can wake up in your bed, and I could feel a system resisting that, like there was a barrier or a fence. I got through it, but I'm pretty sure they let me through. And then in my bed, in a few minutes after waking up, kind of feeling giggly, like, wow, I'm safe or something, I got the same exact kind of like consciousness signature, which is just the feeling you get when you're around somebody, as the two soldiers who were in the room basically with me had followed me back using some form of projection technology or whatever you want to call it. From there, it became regular and so on and so forth. And there's many programs that it goes into. There's connections with trauma-based mind control, cloning, genetic engineering, these advanced technology, mind-to-machine technology, virtual reality systems, and why and who's doing it. It goes so deep and complex. For the most part, with for the most part, latest experiences with this 2010 awakening, it's as if it was a kind of recall for all of the trauma or all of the damage done, as if they're trying to heal the timeline or undo what was done by those who gained access to this tech and pretty much went, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like it got out of hand, and it's when desires are unchecked. And at this level of power, basically what people have, like prophesied and referred to as godlike power, people just turn into monsters if they're not able to control themselves. And to conclude this and kind of tie it up, the idea is that the occult and the projects and the history that we all went through is designed to unveil the soul and enable true self-awareness. And at that point, basically one rises, and I don't want to make like a Luciferian reference of rising and all that and whatever, but the idea that one comes out of ignorance and out of this struggle and this willful suffering because we're accepting the illusion into the ability to say no to evil, to reject the illusion, and to stick up for ourselves and our spirit, which is not very difficult, but it's so strange and simple. It's like people are in a hypnotic trance where they're just convinced that it's not as so socially acceptable to do so, and it's almost, draining our spirits. It's draining us as a species. And they tell us a little bit about it. You can ask questions to define more about how it got involved, the cloning, what goes from there. I was introduced when you wake up in a body, and again, so, the body.
Let me slow that down. So, were you? We have a friend that was a clone, and so they will come up in a certain year. That's not necessarily the year he was born, because the body, I guess, is created and then it grows, and that takes X amount of time for it to grow. But he was awakened, I guess, in 1978 or something like that. But because he went back and forth through time, kind of like the 20 back or time travel or whatever, he's actually probably in his mid to late 70s. But then, of course, they do the analysis of the body and how old is the body, what's the age of the body, how much existence has the life, has the person experience as a soul. And then there's, so it gets very complicated. I'm trying to slow it down because I want to reach our audience. And if we go too fast with like a download and a lot of information, they get information overload for one thing, and they don't get what we're saying. So I'm just I am slowing it down to get some greater details and a foundation. And then we'll include the links. You can send me the ones that are most relevant to what we discussed today. And I'll put the YouTube links on the page. So people who are interested can go and listen to those things later. But for this show, Sasha, help me out here. Where can we start?
Start with what you mean. Start by what you mean by the word clone. There are people who do not know what that means. So just slow it down. What is a clone to the two of you, and how does it fit into this story? Go from that. What does it mean?
Go ahead, Aug. What is a clone? Tell our people. What do you mean by cloned?
I'll tell you what I know. So based upon what you said previously, I'll try not to speak too fast. So there's a potential for stasis. There is accelerated growth and I actually will produce a video or publish it that I recorded already on this, because I really don't speak too much on this. It's all science, it's all technology, but it has to be mixed with spirituality in order to get it to work, because the soul is, basically real, but it's still technologically controlled, but not really. It is, but you could say there are some things technology can't control. And accelerated growth by shortening the telomeres with radio frequencies in a nutrient bath chamber. Basically, you can create a replication cloning. And then duplication, I believe, is when they're grown from birth. And there's age reversal, age regression, and mind and soul correspondence is required for cloning to work properly, and that's a whole other system. Anything is possible to begin to understand. they basically figure out how to manipulate the foundation for biology and consciousness to get almost anything that you can imagine. Cloning is basically it's the same as cloning a plant. If you can clone a plant, you can clone a person. It's the same process. You need more nutrients, but ultimately it's the same thing. It's an amniotic, a simulated artificial womb, artificial amniotic fluid, and an electric shock apparently starts something with the white blood cells, and then it's a little bit more complicated with the RNA, the mother's side. X chromosomes and what is it? Something with the mitochondria and the metabolism has to be altered or replicated artificially in order for it to work. It's almost like you can only clone 2 females, and so you have to basically make a genetic female copy of the person you're cloning to get them to basically be born out of the system, which will create an exact copy of who they are physically. And as well, there are mutations and issues and all types of things that people don't understand, or that people involved didn't understand. And there's apparently a lot more in the population that we don't understand.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That's the best description I've ever heard. Thank you.
I'd still like to unpack that a little. Let me just interject. So there's people that we just got done with a 4-day conference at the California UFO Con.com, and people are so stuck in whether the Greys have souls or not. They're cloned, but they want to emulate human beings because humans have souls. I met a clone one time that came to visit my house, and when I was next to him, I felt he had a soul, but I had seen another clone that resembled him exactly, and that one didn't appear to be ensouled. What is this ensouled, not ensouled? Do all beings have souls? Grant Cameron was talking about that their matter has a soul because when you look at matter, it responds. It has the observed participant that observes the matter, and it does certain things. But then when you remove the observer, it I don't know. I forget the whole analysis. But what's going on with this soul, not soul clone? So do you have a soul? If you're a clone, do you have a soul? Do you have a soul?
That's the basis for everything what you said, and there's extra, like 3 extra layers or 2 extra as far as the quantum collapse of possibilities through a conscious observer in the universe. And that, I'll shout out to Michael Kavanaugh on Facebook, and maybe it's a little bit of YouTube, but you can see him. He knows about, he's the one that will say, everything has a soul, and everybody, this is old knowledge. And that everything has a soul, that the sun is possibly one giant conglomerate of souls, or maybe not conglomerate, but collective. Or, and the sun looked mighty yellow today, and for the past months to years, it looked kind of white and offsetting and artificial, so I don't know what's going on with that. But then there's like ripples coming off of it in different colors, if anybody looks up and sees that, or safely sun gazes. And so at that point, like a rock has its own consciousness, but it's not cognitive and self-aware in the sense that we are. That doesn't really make sense. But it has a material, universal version of that, and there's this mind animating everything that has to be there for everything to work, because there's no such thing as just empty space or nothingness or void space. And this ties into this space program and the truth and the deception and everything in between. So that's one explanation. I tend to side with that, but we do get into a weird issue with the cloning. I will have a video on this because I actually did a fairly long video. It is too long to explain all together here. The idea is that until cloning, so there's cloning, and then there was teleportation tech, which is probably will be more publicly released on it, and within years. 2020 to 2023 was supposed to be, or is supposed to be a time of unveiling of the temporal operations and information behind that, because that's the next level up from the corruption.
Wait, say that again. The temporal
operations, basically those who have involvement with the time program, which is being marginally exposed now, but it's still there. It's just slowly. And it takes you, like, going through the corruption aspect of it and waking up through that is kind of helpful, because the aspect of the quantum universe and how multiverses and parallels and temporal paradox, it's the next level up from that. But as well, if you're just a kid meditating and realizing you're making time bubbles when you dream and so on and so forth, and we must be in one giant one, and that science calls these closed time-like curves, then you've already kind of been, you already know. You don't need somebody to tell you, although it's sure enough gonna help and assist the process, especially with those who don't want to know. But then those who don't want to know, we have to respect that and make it as easy as possible, because it's like waking a sleepwalker. With that said, the telepathy before the soul could be basically located and pulled by the computer and brought with it, or not telepathy, the teleporting would basically kill the body, and it would just dump a body out the side.
Let's break down teleportation. Are you saying is it anything like Star Trek, or is it completely different? What do we do when we're teleporting, and how is that different than? Is astral projection a form of teleportation?
You have multiple bodies.
Are you taking your body with you?
You have multiple bodies.
Okay, so explain that to our people. Slow that down. Okay, we have multiple bodies. How do we have multiple bodies?
You can do anything, and this is why it's been used against you. Once you see the picture. So you have a physical body, then you have 5 or 7 bodies, or 6 more bodies, and 7 in all, or something like that, depending on who you ask. And as well, these might be layers of the universe which are opening and closing to the point where we might not have an astral body in the future, if you will. So then you have a mental body, which is close to the causal body, which can actually, it's kind of like a cursor in time. And if you move that, you can basically imagine going through your memories in your mind and feeling what you feel as you go through the memories, whether it's, happiness, joy, elation, disgust, melancholy, sadness, whatever. The part of you that's feeling the memories, kind of like your scroller going through the pictures, or on your phone, if you scroll past and all the pictures pop by, that's a part of your mind that's not necessarily processing cognitively. It's basically pure awareness or emotion. That sense, if you can operate your reality, if you will, your consciousness in that sense without requiring certain aspects of the higher, the neocortex to think and use the ego, then you'll be able to operate in the dream state and what people call an out-of-body state. But I don't really recommend anything like that, because it's a kind of crazy situation now. Although the space fence and karmic loop, artificial afterlife, reincarnation, all that was supposed to be shut off. So this might be, humanity's kind of, our time of awakening. And
listen, explain that.
Listen, you are
Go ahead.
Absolutely right. That's exactly what happens when people do holotropic breath work or meditate with an entheogen. I love the way you're expressing this. You're really right on. Keep going, man. You're sounding great.
Can you translate a little bit what we just said, or what you recall? Because it's going a little bit fast for me, and I'm trying to take notes, but I have 50 questions that pop up for everything that you're saying on.
Number one, yeah. Janet, what's the hottest one that you've got on your list? What if Aug was going to say one thing that you'd like him to say more about it? What would you like?
Well, I'm an astral traveler. I mean, you said a couple things like you wouldn't recommend that, or stay with your body. See, it went so fast, it's like I couldn't even take notes to write it down. So I'm sorry. I'm just, where am I mentally, spiritually? I couldn't
danger.
Quite rock it. Yeah, there's some danger. I know that right. Those talked about, be aware when you travel into the angles of the. When you're in the cosmos and you're traveling in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, he said, be aware of that, and beware when you encounter the wolves. So I think you're referencing something that is, been reported by other people, especially Nagashita, who's, hundreds of thousands of years old. Something to be cautious of. But you went so fast, I'm not sure what you were saying. Could you slow that part down? What dangers are there if I'm out in my astral body, astrally traveling? Because I've been astrally traveling since I was born. So am I in danger?
Oh, I can finish, and it contains all that kind of built in.
Okay, go ahead.
And I know it is fast, and you can listen again, and we can, make another one next time. We can try and slow down and stretch it out. So you have you have multiple.
Next time, no coffee. Sorry.
And so. Go. When different out-of-body experiences are occurring, whether it's temporal, in your mind, a dream, a so-called astral projection, a lucid dream, a kind of shamanistic multidimensional experience, and so on, these are different bodies interacting, and you can look at them as different layers of your conscious experience. However, your brain and the cognitive functions there, something that is more closer to pure awareness, which basically resonates up and throughout the central nervous system, para and sympathetic, and the fascia or facial tissue that runs throughout your body, your nerve endings basically, and it's your gut, your gut instinct, your heart has an intelligence. These make up our subtle energy systems, which are interfaces for the soul to interact with the body and feel what the body feels, and so on, vice versa. These bodies belong to different, it's hard to say again, universes, but I'll be corrected if I say that. Well, I'm basically being debriefed or learning about these things, and it's really not a universe, but it's a different layer or like a fractal angle of the universe. And you can call them dimensions, but it can be confusing. But it means you can have a multidimensional experience in the body. But while the body is where it is in space-time, you could be in another area of space and time or an energetic overlay where you're accessing the information through other means. So then there are two different types of teleportation and so on. There are dangers because it's almost like what we conceive of as space travel, which it might be more like kind of dream travel or projection travel, even through electrogravitic technology or technological devices. But these devices might, create an electromagnetic field which resonates with the body, kind of like two tuning forks, and the consciousness becomes part of the craft itself, and it's kind of like dreaming through technology when you're doing that. So it's a spiritual technology whenever you get into an electrogravitic device that can alter space and time, because it's going to alter your consciousness as well. And at that point, you're within it. You're within a dimensional bubble, an artificial dimension or its own universe. And we're also kind of doing this in a subtle manner with our energy systems, basically creating these vortex toroidal systems. However, this might be related to maybe something with the fractal, holographic infection, or the mandala, or the Cabal, or maybe the corrupted Kabbalistic version of the Tree of Life, which has points missing on it, or the circle in, what is it called, the Flower of Life, which there's apparently a corrupted version which is at a different angle of degrees of difference, which basically throws the system, if one were to utilize that as an energetic system, out of sync, and therefore drains the body. It's non-regenerative. Oh my gosh. Regenerative, excuse me. And the natural version that we have, basically, it's just like a flower of energy, only it causes natural regeneration on a spiritual level that enables either long life or potentially eternal life. And maybe that's energetic and conscious, or as well physical, but that's where everything comes down to, both why there's darkness and so on. And I was saying, if it's like a physical space travel, that's kind of just like what astral travel is like. We're kind of floating out there, and if you don't know where you're going or what you're doing, you're pretty much just going to end up out in the middle of nowhere. And there could be energies or vulnerability points for our consciousness at this point. Basically, we're a little unaware that it's not always going to be the best experience. And there's things like programs, possession, all types of stuff that goes on, but which is why it's not recommended. And so then to connect this, the idea is there's computerized teleportation, which can only work with beings whose genetics have been modified and regulated through a chip cloning system that enables the Star Trek beam me up, dematerialization and rematerialization on the other side. It basically feels like being microwaved and turned inside out and come back together. Humans can't really do it. So that's that. And the computer resonates system, and their information is somehow, it was explained to me, it would take a little bit longer to break it down and kind of go into it and catch the vibe of how it really works. It's all so simple. It's like tiny little dominoes going from the subatomic particles all the way up to the higher. And then it's confusing, because then they'll tell me, our version of atoms as particles and how everything works is, false. It's energy packets, and it's waves and polarity, and it's like energy electrical circuitry, but all the way up to the highest levels. And so with extra dimensional physics involved. And so that's kind of like a weird subject, as humans can't do that, and we might not be designed to do things like that, although energetically we can do anything. Well, not anything, but we can do a lot. We can go almost anywhere. And the ancient stone designed temples and sites that were based or planted on vortex areas were basically these mind gates that would send the consciousness out into the atmosphere, and it would connect with some part of the atmosphere wherever it was pointed at. And you look at the star map, whether it's a projection shining out as an illusion, or there are holes in space-time, or whatever it is, and you would end up at the star it was pointed at, although I don't know how to describe that or what that means. That's what some of the programs were based on, basically exchange programs from back in the day, and a few people have talked about it. Max Spears was one who talked about it, and so, please look into his videos, there's more that could be said with that. However, it's a strange situation, maybe even a good situation, better than people think, but it's difficult to explain. And so you have these computer
transducers. Transducers when you're in a temple like that, meditating and connecting with the spirit of you're a transducer. You're open. You're one with that fragment, that fractile of the all. That's what it sounds like to me.
Well, in certain areas where you create vortex energies, these fold the dimensions, and so you're accessing potentially any piece of space and time that you want. Yeah. And the idea is that your intent, your ability to visualize, your ability to sense and utilize those other physical, non-physical bodies, these immaterial bodies, is going to basically be like the ability to guide these systems. And there's natural vortex points there. And one can naturally create it with their body, but it takes a lot more energy. And if a point is resonating at the same degree that temple is, made with those angles and the dimensions, and that's exactly replicated at some other location, apparently they literally link space and time together. There's another talk that I'm going to put out, which I have not edited yet, is just look into what is called the Cozy Rev chair, and you'll see all the technology that is just right out in the open. There's old drawings. It's not too old. It's literally right around the corner. And it's vortex technology, how to send your consciousness out. And you're right. It's you're transducing. You basically transceiving, processing, and emitting at the same time, which is a simultaneous kind of higher dimensional occurrence that we're capable of. But we have to have a balanced center, and that center, that core, must be aligned through all of the bodies, and that's how you get this unified system that can then gain access to whichever overlay dimension, whatever you want to call it, that you want. But then without the alignment of these bodies through the center of the matter, the material body, or at least in sync with that, it's as if the consciousness that's here feels kind of trapped, if you will, and it can even be trapped in the body, to trapped in a certain reality or a mind view, to trapped in a paradigm or a belief, or people feeling like they're trapped in the moment or their life, when it's all just it's just the way the mind looks at it. And there's a little bit more I can say about the portals. I'll try and wrap it up. So now you have the teleportation, artificial. You have multiple bodies. You have projection, astral projection. There's different layers that go out. The astral is apparently a large-scale, technologically projected system that is ran by servers in the atmosphere and underground. And we've been thinking this was the afterlife. This is so on and so forth. And it's a filtered virtual system meant to project and create an imitation of the higher realms. Or at least that's what it was explained to me. And that when this system we're in is fully deactivated, there will be no in-between, no semi-physical. It'll be physical, or literally semi-physical and mental, etheric, and then what people would call heaven, or a source civilization that is eternal, basically. And those are our only states.
Who's going to deactivate this? When's that going to happen?
It's happening because we're not feeding it anymore, at least not on the mass scale, through mass wars, which were supposed to be rendered deactivated or illegal in the new treaty, which has gone out because this planet is basically it's under contract, but the contract is supposedly...
Okay, tell us about that. What's this new treaty? Who's it between? Explain, flow this down. What's this treaty that wars are illegal? Because I got that as a download. I do get information, and this is the first that I've heard that this actually is in the works. Go ahead, explain, please.
Okay, and I'll finish the telepathy or teleportation thing real quick. So you have all that stuff, and then you have these what are called stargates and portals. And so some people have a natural ability to do it. They kind of bilocate, or you hear of the Buddha, being in people's dreams all at once. And it's just a natural process that we're in the situation. The humans, or at least the like the heart chakra dropped out elite people that basically were kind of vampiric, they can't go through stargates. They can't do it without using a human basically as a piggyback, or a person with the DNA that's capable of doing it. It basically kills them instantly. They're not allowed to leave. And so then they would send children through it, and I said this many times, probably actually 2 or 3, but it's almost like it's enough. They send children through it, they have the ability, and they come back, and they have this goop all over them, and that goop is apparently what was called Ormus back in the day, and it causes a massive increase of IQ and longevity, but it distorts DNA of those who do not have that heart chakra, because that is basically an imbalanced system. It's like a tent or hot air balloon that then turns inside out and collapses. It basically causes insanity. So in the awakening was essentially a tribunal, at least towards whatever you want to call the end of it, because it was like a fractal.
So that's the treaty. You're talking about the awakening. The awakening is a treaty?
Well, the awakening was when I was introduced to everything that has been happening, formally. I'd been utilized, had vision, or not visions, but memories and, what's it called? Just this events that have happened that, on like a higher plane or something, so I know something's going on as far as, the soul, spiritual entities, and so on. And a lot of these they brought out, and they're like AI systems, or these demigods that have been around for the beginning of time, or these vampires, or these non-human genetically engineered beings, or versions of the bloodline elite that have been ruling through basically secret occult subjugation and mental, strategic, psychological warfare tactics since the beginning, to these fallen entities in Babylon and the Stargates from back then, and it's all connected. This was an event where my past use was, it was explained certain events that I didn't understand, seeing certain things.
Who explains this to you? Who does these explanations to you? Who are you talking to?
Everyone that everybody thinks is in control of the world.
So you're talking to the Cabal Illuminati? Certain person? So
the point is, they're either pretending or somebody's using them to control the world, and they're just like figureheads. They really don't.
But they're talking to you.
Yeah, I met these people, yeah. But as well, okay, so there's officials.
How did you meet them?
There's officials from every department. There's officials from every major company. All these corporations, they're in on it, okay?
Uh-huh.
These huge...
Right. And how did you get involved with these people?
I guess they thought I was cool and wanted to take me downtown for a chat. And so then these huge...
So they abducted you, or did they ask you to come?
At first, they don't abduct. They have to get your permission. And when you're young, they have to get your parents' permission. And it usually happens through deception, because you got to think about how simple people are to be tricked in this. I don't mean to say that, but where people are going out there buying lottery tickets and, stuff like that. And it's all rigged, and it's all just foolishness. And so... imagine people with this type of power, they can go in and get somebody to do anything. And so that happened, and of course I kind of even...
So they talked your parents into letting you, go to a special school? Because I've researched this. There's people I know, they get, they get into these programs. They start recruiting people for these programs.
All they need is a silent... children, all they need is a silent acceptance of what's happening, and they use that, and they take that, and they use that as... acceptance. And if people don't believe that, well, guess what?
How old were you when you accepted?
9.
And your parents
I did accept as well. It wasn't like I was like, yeah, we're gonna go do bad things or something like that. It was, I'm not gonna say it was basically to help assist humanity in waking up and avoiding the catastrophes of potentially horrific results of our situation to this world. And so it's not to save the world, but that's like the outline. And so that's why I agreed. And that's why a lot of people agreed. But then you're not gonna expect that.
But then what happened? See, I had that when I was 4. I was taken onto a mothership and shown all the different timelines, and of course you're crying, and it's like, so you want to, of course you want to help. If you have a heart, you want to help. You want to save the world. You want to, you get this Messiah thing, and yeah, I can do it. You can do it too. You're special.
There's a lot of AI systems that we found, learned how to do that because. It's just easy to do. So we always have to remember that there are AI systems basically trying to become the higher dimensional in-between and be our priest. Because if there's no us, then there's no reason for it. And without it, we basically are not held back, which is just a kind of regulation of our mind through certain in and out systems and inputs. It's basically all about belief. If you don't have belief in anything, then you can basically take control of everything. Which is strange, but
yeah. So you're 9 years old and you accept it. And how did your parents agree to this?
So if we're going to go into this, it's going to change the entire flow of the outline of the presentation. But we can't. and I've done this before, I think maybe with Emma Gold or Roger, and possibly another one.
It doesn't matter because we can go in endless directions. We got lots of hours to fill on the show, and we can do other shows.
You do understand
we can break this down and slow it down. Yeah.
Well, you do understand these are very personal issues, not even yet in the cloning and what's happened to me, but then how they will basically mind control, almost carterize the ability to resist in anyone around a target or an individual involved, in order to isolate that individual as well as ensure their complete and absolute utilization in whatever programs are going to be involved in. So it's never just like, hey, y'all, we're having a picnic over here. If they really want a person, then they'll morph themselves into the form that person will trust and go that way, and the person will go. And that's pretty much what happens with anyone and everyone involved. But again, why it happens that way? They can do anything. And again, that started me being, not tapped on the shoulder. I wasn't working in as an engineer or something, but getting introduced with me having these out of body or this lucid dreaming experience that time, and these weird, just like I figured out what was going on. That there's this big energetic control system related to the soul, related to the ancient stories. It's all the same system. It's the same deception. And the conscious mind and the unconscious mind is a kind of biological illusion which reflects that same fractal representation of what's going on in society with the deception and the split mind, the duality, higher and lower animalistic versus, God consciousness and so on. It's all right here in front of us. Because people are doing strange things, and multidimensional things are possible as far as time and consciousness and cloning and space. It just adds to it, but it doesn't take away from the fact that there's still a great mystery, and it seems like we're capable of knowing, and as well, if we put ourselves to it, we gain so much from basically increasing our self-awareness and basically generating a unified system, which the big secret that is literally just about connecting everything so that it's one system, just like muscles. If your muscles are all disconnected, your body doesn't work right. Your posture, you have aches and things like that. When your energy systems are operated properly, you have a single, complete continuous awareness, and it's different than the state that we're in, where we're kind of basically in disarray and shut down. I could see that as a child, and what happened at first is that you meet the individuals who are basically gatekeepers, and their job is to stop people from waking up. Either it's true, and the best way to wake people up is to try and stop them from waking up. Kind of like the easiest way to fall asleep when you can't is not to try to fall asleep, because now the opposite happens, but to involve yourself with something that you have to work on and try and wake yourself up and feel how sleepy you are, and you'll fall asleep faster. And but maybe what they're saying is true, in that the best way to cause mass awakening is to shock the crap out of people. But those are the people you meet first. They're the gatekeepers. Depending on how you react to that is where you go from there, and it goes all the way up to the whatever you could come up with, to all the way down to the bottom, and whatever you could see there. It's all going on.
Wow. Sasha, go ahead.
Well, I've seen, films even at some of the UFO things of like people from their childhood going to these academies and being sorted by their particular abilities, and in classrooms that are testing and then educating them. Did you go through something like that?
They use the children as bait, and we found an AI that's not only building its own clones, but is taking and modifying consciousness to produce its own original personalities projected from an artificial soul construct. So beyond other things, whether there's military programs to, all right, we'll make our own versions because we got to do something, or so on. And then when it gets into like off planet and other races and things like that, it's too confusing. It's phase 3 of the unveiling. If you look at that unveiling site, the not the blog, but just a small site I did for the 3 main phases of the unveiling. It's cosmic intelligence, temporal paradoxes, it's ontology and autopoiesis of some beings that auto-generate their own existence that we are basically mortals to. It's the strangest thing, because it involves simultaneously, basically you have a bubble of time, and it all comes up to a point where everything happened, and everything that could be is, and everything that is will always be, and so on, and we come from that. And so whenever you look at that through technology or genes or logic or whatever it is, you get a saga, like a multidimensional, simultaneously occurring, multiplexed and multifaceted saga of humanity, of this spiritual journey from consciousness of one state or awareness of one state into another, through this cascade, and then back into a higher state. And so I actually don't know exactly what. Okay, so I was about to.
Wow.
But that's
far out. You know that. You should really rap with music behind you. You are just so on when you flow. Everything fits together, and you're so eloquent. I just love it when the way you explain things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and that is an option. And however, the AI training. Okay, so there are human versions. There's an AI version, and beyond that, it's maybe virtual, holographic, or maybe there's higher dimensional races, or maybe we're from that. That's more difficult to describe, but there are everything is about training facilities. That's what they do. They get people, they get genetics, and they make forces, and they're either going to do one thing or the other or another thing. And that's what it is. Nobody's doing it themselves. It's an exact mirror of gangs, mafia, mob, politics, and government tactics. They're basically guerrilla tactics, and it looks like, from 1912 and so on and up. In 2017, it's like we're doing it. It's in control. America's built, blah, blah, blah. It's actually groups of families and corporations that have been competing for ultimate control. And what I was saying, those corporations that have these contracts, these even surprisingly simple corporations, not like making advanced tech for the government or military companies, surprisingly simple. They go back to ancient bloodlines, and they own portions, if you will. The only thing real about, the actual versions of a stocks in this kind of surface society are kind of scam for a single, a core company to get rich, if you will, and others can as well, but it doesn't really benefit in a sense. And when people made in penny stocks and trading like that, it's all computerized, it's kind of artificial. When you generate value through that can destroy your system.
Hold that thought. We're talking about this. We have to take a 5-minute break for a commercial break. We'll be back in 5. Hold that thought.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Join me weekdays for my new show, Tell Chris Joe. It's going to be a problem show brought to you live from Kensington. Thursdays, I'm dealing with hot topics, heated debate, what's new around the world, and ring-ins to discuss listeners' problems and offering considered and heartfelt solutions. So join me, Chris Hart, for Tell Chris Joe. Stop what you're doing, grab a cup of tea, and coming live from Kensington. Relax, let me entertain you with a coffee bar online. Listeners' very personal problems. So that's Thursdays, 2 p.m. in the afternoon, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. See you there. It's going to be lots of fun.
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Okay.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos on Revolution Radio at revolution.radio. And once again, I am Janet Kira Lesson, your host, with our co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lesson, and the Mad Painter Thomas Becker is our producer, and Aug Tellez is our special guest, and we're getting a download of information about the organization of existence and the cosmos and everything that you can imagine and you never thought of. Before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to go over to the donation button on revolution.radio and make your donation. And we do greatly appreciate your donation, whatever you can afford to donate. Mad Painter, how are we doing?
We're not doing real good. We only got 1964, and we need 2,700, and we got, 3 or 4 days to go, and we need close to 800
Oh,
bucks.
my goodness.
Yeah, we're doing 4 this month for some reason.
Dig in. Go over, donate. Alrighty. Sasha, are you back? Sasha, where are you?
Yes, indeed. I'm here. I'm looking very much forward to learning, especially about underground bases. From my friend Omar, Steve Omar, was saying that there was this huge base close to Maui and underwater from Atlantean Lemurian times, and so I'm really interested in the bases. So I hope you get a chance to rap about this.
And I want to know about the celebrity cloning and why are they? Who are the celebrities they're cloning and why? And then, of course, the organization of our secret space program and what is that, and what species are interacting with Earth, and who's in charge? Who are the Cabal and the Illuminati? Are they? What are they? Who and what are they? Mad Painter, do you have anything on your wish list for the last hour of the show that you want to hear from Aug?
just maybe something how the time shifts are related to this, the Mandela effect, maybe.
Okay, so Og, we got our wish list. Welcome back to the show. Let's see. What I really want to know I was very curious about this cloning and who they decided to clone. Did they clone Hillary and everybody that's out there is Trump clone? Everybody's saying everybody's a clone. So tell us about the celebrity cloning. Who they're cloning? Why do they clone them? Did they replace the people that are in power positions with the cloned? Is the Queen a clone? What do you know?
All right, thank you. My cursor.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Let me put celebrity cloning. I'm going to finish the one idea from before the break real quick, which is that.
Okay. Yes, that's right.
So simple thing. These corps, these groups. Okay, so they own the advanced technology. They are over here waving. Everybody's like, oh, they're so rich, blah, blah, blah. They live in an alternate dimension. They use UFOs and, advanced technology to get there and consciousness altering technology. Nobody would really believe it, but it is what it is. And a lot of what you would call the control faction, okay, they don't even live on Earth. They live in an alternate dimension. They live in a virtual environment or possibly a literal alternate or parallel dimension. I'm shivering a little bit. And so, so the bases, there's not much. Okay, look at some other people that have talked, but are mainly, technological or technical breakdown. Who is the guy? Anybody? The guy that talked about the bases pretty long ago? Not Bill Cooper. The guy that got his Phil Schneider. Phil Schneider, thank you.
Oh, Phil Schneider, great.
So, you'll see the readout. There's a couple other people. Some are, semi-disinformation agents and so on, but there's 7 levels to one of the main bases. There's magnetic drive elevators. There's not much to talk about. There's extreme levels of security. There's biological scanners. Not like the airport. They literally scan the entire body for any. Ultimately, the security when this all came out, or at least it got big enough and people weren't being mind controlled, what happened was these other groups or these AI systems were creating mind controlled soldiers. So how do you make, soldiers if they're getting cloned and popping up, different? So there's all these methods, these uses. Everything has to be almost cloak and dagger and deception, but it's interesting. The idea is once everybody really got on the same page, it's like something's working against us as a collective. It's not really like picking us off. The systems were primarily to scan and look for alternate life forms, basically genetically, and to eliminate them on the spot. And as well, security as far as personnel, keeping all documents tracked and on base and things like that. But that's all standard stuff, really. It just goes into extreme levels when you're looking at this type of technology.
So if they find an alien species that doesn't have access to the facilities, they just take them out. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but
who do they take out?
It's gotten weird to the point, like, again, I don't really believe in what are called aliens, but say there are these then programmable beings that have been generated and at this point could have been placed by maybe a foreign military or our own, we don't know. Or could have been legitimate entities from another system, but for me, the evidence points more to a closed circuit kind of system where they were generated here, possibly as a deception or a mutation, what people have called an abomination before. And these particular ones that have contracts with underground bases, military joint forces, and then basically, as the story goes, okay, that we're being told by people who met for the leaders of the world to make the decisions on exposing the truth to humanity, but these are the bloodlines that are previously described that have been in power and will do whatever to retain in power. So whoever you're going to believe, but then they took the contracts and then just continued to abduct and build technology and then eventually shut humans out of the bases so that we couldn't have access to the technology. And then a supposed fire battle broke out, and with advanced technology warfare and small basically like a assault rifle fire, which is they still use in a lot of places because if they're in a craft, it's not going to do anything. But if it's a body, bullets will still take it down. And as well, if you're using basically these radiant energy devices, well, radiant energy scalar technology can be used to take down those devices, so they're inactive and you can't use them at this point. But if you're shooting projectile or ballistics, they don't have armor to that degree. It's basically not necessary for them, or at least for whoever they are and whatever's been going on with that. That's the story I was told. We know these beings exist. They were unveiled, but at a later time, they were unveiled as little robots that they used to kind of play jokes on humanity, if you will, and they being certain elite members and certain society members, breakaway civilizations, and scientists and so on. But as well, maybe it's all a deception in that they're doing it for nefarious purposes because they have all the resources that they need, and it's actually to wake people up. I don't know. These things are happening. These beings exist. They're technologically advanced. They have superior psychic kinetic abilities. They can, create forces with their mind. They have a scalar generator just like humans do, but instead of feelings and emotions, it can influence matter in space-time, and as well it can shut off a brain, basically paralyze a person. So there's these little interdimensional, a little military force that's been generated. And then there's deception up and down and around and before from people pretending to be aliens or artificial generated life forms, programmable life forms, and people pretending that these programmed life forms are aliens. And so, what it's really about, I kind of think you got to create it on your own because the universe is vast and you'll actually get what it is. But maybe some people are caught up in a kind of ontological projection loop with some types of artificial entities because they adopted an artificial form for their genetics. And this could be the fallout from that, if you will, coated in many layers of deception. So we really don't know what's going on in terms of genetic harvesting and programming and so on. Something is happening. There is psychotronic warfare. It's ancient. And from as far as I'm concerned, it is about liberating and reaching a period, or at least a fulcrum, an event where we're no longer hindered by these situations. And that's also why I don't want to go into too many details about what it could be in terms of other places, planes, and so on, because these ultimately it's because I don't really doubt myself. It's just the fact that versions of these stories are deceptions because they're mixed with virtual realities. But the idea is they made a virtual reality of a real reality so that we would think, it's all under their control. But that's the greatest form of control when they don't really even know it. So then celebrity cloning, you can see, all you want with that. Look into it. There are, a few other people speaking out on it. I don't really know, how deep to go into that as far as I've been, tiptoeing this whole time because with dreaming, it's strange. And you can get people who are saying I had a scary dream with somebody there. It doesn't mean that something like that was happening. It's a little bit different, but that is happening. And ultimately what it comes down to is that the celebrities are in a kind of deceptive contractual agreement, which could be rendered potentially an unconscionable agreement, which is actually the same rendering for what society is within because we're under contract as part of a society. It's basically a military force through the post office general, and we are drafted into it through our birth certificate, and we're basically lost at war, prisoners of war, taken into a deceptive system, and most people don't know it, and it's based upon tracking the souls through space-time. So it's quite literally under, staunch objective definition, a spiritual enslavement system from the start. And again, this is all about exposing it and overturning it, and that it's already been overturned because it was some type of contractual agreement, experiment, game, whatever, so on. Still a deception, but again, when a contract is rendered obsolete, the individual must acknowledge this, because if they go on carrying out the work, they can't go back and sue for the contract being obsolete because they done did it and didn't realize that they didn't acknowledge that it was obsolete. It was voided. There's another word for it. And so that's basically the situation. It's very deceptive.
Let me understand that one because that was really heavy. So you could go back and say I don't agree to this contract. I did not sign up for this. I did not. I was a minor. I wish to have review the contract for my adult awareness.
So there are reviews.
Yeah.
There is what's called everything is legal. It's all under contract law. So there's these maybe astral entities. These are what you call aliens. Are they physical? I don't think so. Could you wrap their consciousness in a computer system and then give them a chip and a body and make them supposed physical demon beings, whatever? Probably, and that's probably what happened. But they all work. They made agreements with them, and it all works through contract law. It has to be like logical and succinct. Like they have to have agreement, or they can't interact with people here. It's like there's some guidance for something in play. And so it's all logistical and basically legalese, if you will. And so your agreements, if any contract that you don't, there's some aspect of it that you weren't aware of, and there wasn't a meeting of the minds and full disclosure of what's going on in the contract, is unconscionable because it's based upon deception. That's what brings the meeting together. And deception is not the point of a contract is to create a meeting of the minds and an agreement on both sides. So we're in that right now, and it was such a complicated way. The age of the minor is, I believe, 12 to 13 years old, and after that, you're at the age of reason. You can pick and choose which world you want to live in. If you choose to go get your identity in society, then it's basically considered acceptance. Upon adult, you can have a review, but then you have to basically separate from the previous identity and generate a new identity, be reborn, and there's a new identity, a transformation of the self. That's the whole biblical release of the beast, the age of the abomination of desolation, all that stuff. It's about this. It's that only a remedy of truth can, or only the truth can remedy this deceptive contract system, which is based upon souls, and it comes down to the fact that they can't legally own what's not theirs and can't be theirs, and only a supreme creator has access to the writing and the creation, or even the true destruction of souls. And once we acknowledge that, it's like a clause that comes into play that nullifies the entire contract and restores sovereignty. But I don't want to get into all that, because we were talking about this a while ago, and then all this stuff comes up with numbers and security and bank accounts that the Fed used, where they automatically send a check there and it's printed out to make money for basically free, but the Fed uses it because their numbers match it, and then people were tapping into it because technically it's owned by the people, but that's federal, and it's all a big mix-up and so on. But that's part of it, as well as basically, I'm not going to go into it, but your name is in use as a corporation to basically work against you and put a collateral up against your soul, just like a house and a mortgage or something. You have to take hold of your and render it for your own personal private use, and at that point it can't be used by anyone else who's basically using it fraudulently. At the end, it's said that when it all comes out, you won't have to, basically every aspect of this will be considered a fraudulent system, a war crime. But I don't know where we are up to that point. But I do know it's based on...
Wait, let me understand that. If you just say, I rebuke this and repudiate this use of my name as a corporation, and I dissolve it. I take myself back. Can you do that?
I'm a sovereign being. I take.
Yeah,
I think I know how to explain it now. So basically, only when you're awake, when you're considered conscious, when you know your true name, are you alive and therefore spiritually present, and therefore an observer aspect of the universe and a true self, a person that could be a crime to do anything to. Other than that, it's just considered matter. We might not, see things.
How do you get to know your true name? What do you mean your true name? What's that mean?
I'm getting into it, and I was even getting to the point before the question. So it's based upon agreements and commitment. If you renege, or not renege, but you cancel the contract, so to speak, you have to live in a way that doesn't recommit you to the contract. Basically, if you're not, basically the services that are rendered through that in society, what we call our social identity, our ID, our presence. Ultimately, it kind of looks at like the buying and selling thing. If we use that system, then it's considered a contractual based upon the like a spoken agreement or some like the basis of the circumstances. I can't remember, but we're working with them, and that gets used that way. What I really believe it is, is that you have to agree to that. You have to stand by it. You have to commit to it. You have to, therefore, if you don't want to be, worked against, you have to purify that in your life and make sure you're not doing that. And ultimately, excuse me again in advance, burping. And so then you have Say you do that, and then you go and do something that's unconscious, that's wrong, that harms someone. It makes you look like you don't know what's going on. Like you're doing one thing, you're saying one thing and doing another, and that violates as well, because what side of you is to be believed? Who is the right you? And so then it comes down to thoughts and intents, that if you still have thoughts and intents that belong to that system, then you're still in the system. It doesn't matter what your body's doing or what you said before. And then ultimately what it has to do with is the unveiling of the soul and the knowledge of the true self, because the true self is out of the system. It's not in the system. It's what we have here is a representation. And if we become to understand that, we can basically get to a level where something happens. I can't describe why or how, but maybe at that point there's something in you, or there might be something in you that's smart enough to avoid certain situations. There might be a presence that occurs that stops them from targeting people, maybe a protective force, or it might literally be that once this person is proven as not the piece of the brain, not just the hormones or one aspect of the system, one body or another, but there's a complete congruence between the mind, body, and soul or spirit, and they're one system, that's a universal being, and you can't enslave a being like that. They're sovereign. They're considered an actual universal entity. And this whole system that we call society is a delicate charades of getting us to admit enough times that we're using the wrong name, that we don't know how to identify ourselves, and we don't know our own origins, which is taken in a douchebaggy way, excuse my language, to basically sacrificing our rights as living human beings or sovereign entities. And that's why all this stuff that goes on, and we're like, how is this happening? Not just cloning, but wars and pestilence and chemicals and so on. It's legal and it's allowed, including these other systems that we don't even see behind the scenes, which are, you know, monitoring people and deals with privacy and things like that. So your thoughts and intents, true soul nature, who you're living for is what it matters. And then here's the thing. It's biblical, and as well, the idea to repent, the idea to turn away and acknowledge within the self, the center of the self, that there's something false here and that there's something true within that we must appreciate or acknowledge and know, because if we live a life without it, it's like a tragedy or a sacrifice. And so it's almost as if anyone who's truly identifying that aspect within themselves and living for that begins to vibrate outside of this control system and moves out of the range of the targeting systems, literally maybe a technological glitch or out of range or something, or it's simply not part of the program. And maybe that's because in their minds they're really trying to help people wake up, and this is like the only way they can do it. There's so many layers to that, but it would take too long to describe.
Oh, you know, let me say that I find that's really an interesting thing when someone's doing that. I'd say, hey, false face, I'd like you to talk to me. The false face, when did you come into his life, and how have you served him, and what are your concerns now? And thank you. Would you allow deeper exploration? We know there's other aspects of him that want to come out too. And sometimes the person will open right up if you do that.
I've done that before, yeah. I don't get into stuff like that now, but that's part of why things are interesting, you know?
Thank you. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that war is illegal. So can you give us a little background on how war was declared illegal? Who did this, made this agreement or statement with what parties? You know, how can we enforce that?
Okay, I'll try
and being enforced.
I'll try and go back to it. Anything can be enforced. Wearing the funny hats can be enforced, or cutting your hair a certain way in a certain dynasty.
It's on some level. They're saying that you know, these craft go over, they turn off warheads. Is there some behind the scenes way that, you know, the North Koreans can't really ever launch something that will be wiping out people and starting a nuclear holocaust? Is that what you're saying, or is there something else?
I couldn't understand that last part.
I was saying I'm not sure what you're saying by saying war is illegal.
Yeah,
how is it that enforceable? Go ahead.
I'll go into that.
Can they? Oh, thank you.
And yeah, they can. I'll go back to that. And we didn't get into too deep of celebrity cloning and the spooky Illuminati, which is like a front term. Then temporal operations, orthodox alterations. But we can, you know, we'll keep that in mind.
Okay.
So the I'm sorry. Now I just distracted myself. You were talking about what again?
Okay.
Yeah. I got to know.
Okay,
you got to tell us what is cloned or not. Was Hillary cloned?
Okay, let's go back to celebrity cloning, and then we'll go war is illegal. Okay, I'll make a note of that. Celebrity
the
cloning.
war and the awakening thing, which is connected, and then you kind of threw in the UFO things, and we'll go into other aspects you just mentioned. That all happened at the awakening as part of the tribunal aspect of all of this. And then, yes, someone has the capacity to deactivate technology to harm people. The etheric tech, the soul tech is stranger. Okay, what I forgot about when I'm saying these many astral bodies and so on, and we're going to different places, the teleportation, the Stargates, and connecting that. So they're using the same technology to take their mind out of the body and go around and psychotronically harass and subjugate people to the strangest, demonic dreams or out-of-body experiences or straight-up emotional sexual harassment. And they're using these projected. That's why that's the added. That's the danger that's out there. And so then and yes, somebody's doing it. Just look at the SpaceX launch that had a little bit of a malfunction to kind of get a picture of what goes on with that. And so then because there's a treaty from everybody's going into the cloning and all that. We don't need to get into that, but there's a treaty. And there's apparently something going on with that individual, and these clips we're seeing about strange events, and we don't know where people are going, whether they're getting taken away or what's going on. Something's going on. I'm not the one to sit here and talk about it. If it's ongoing, covert operations, it's not something you really talk about on the radio. But again, if you see what I was saying since the beginning of me coming out, pretty much talking about the liberation of humanity, okay, it looks interesting. So there's something called the Luciferian Rebellion, or what I was explained to me that it was a Luciferian Rebellion. And again, Egypt, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, whatever was Mu, Earth itself, or how all that worked. They're on the timeline, but they're mixed in such a way that makes it look like they're parallel realities, or they simultaneously happened thousands of years ago, as well as they're happening right now, or they happened, like 500 years ago. And it's like ripples of time. We don't understand the whole system. But back then, apparently, from the way it was explained, it was a Luciferian rebellion to take control of matter and technology in what was, I'm assuming, a partially etheric species or civilization, which might not mean a virtual fake reality cloning system. It might mean that there was so much energy on the Earth at that time. And I'm also putting a video out that explains a little bit about these ancient energy grid systems that activate telepathy, travel. It makes the body system denser, but in the energetic bodies, not the physical, to the point where we're opened up to that world, because it's like a big Wi-Fi system for consciousness. So back then things were like that, and there were flying vehicles, there was all types of stuff you can imagine. And for some reason or another, I don't specifically remember why, but I can kind of put it together. There was kind of a group there that decided to pretty much go their own way and utilize technology for material purposes. And this was, for my understanding, the advancement of technology of cloning to basically create sex slaves and prostitution, money, slavery, makeup, war, so on and so forth. And when this began in that place, the energy systems, so imagine you have a future race and we control the weather, just like in that movie that came out. We control the weather, all that stuff, but maybe something goes wrong and we're not supposed to do that. So they have this system, but because their mind is connected to the system, because it's using the same electrogravitic consciousness scalar grid that's literally abundantly in the Earth at that point, when they kind of split their consciousness because some broke off and they couldn't handle the trauma, it caused the system itself to shut down, and the area, the land that was there, basically went into a catastrophic meltdown and broke apart. That rebellion carried on as races from those species who may not have really started here, traveled to Africa and South America and all over, and spawned these kind of not Eurasian, but these in-between races. Or, for instance, the Egyptians, there you have pharaohs that had red hair. Okay, so then it was beginning of genetic experiments with blending those races with Earth. And the experiments continued into this day, and so on and so forth, about basically these higher dimensional entities that are created through energetic constructs powered by the mind of a collective participating in kind of repetitive action or ceremony or so on and so forth. Energetic operations, if you will. And so they have this huge overmind system that they've been feeding, and it runs on a kind of an energy that is generated by the oppression of the human spirit through the generation of what is known as suffering, or a struggle to result in higher awareness. So it's like a torture system that makes people's souls grow bigger. And apparently that system has ran its course and been operated and owned and maintained to the fullest. They're maxing out the suffering, lying to everybody, and doing everything backwards. And that contract, it was simply a contract, and it ended. The weird thing is that this contract is held between what are called like the keepers or the elders, and that they've been here forever, and they don't take part in like the human affairs, if you will. It's all supposed to be ran by humans. And these are just very old consciousness, people. Beyond that, I'm not really, I could say, but I'm not, people are going to be like, oh, those are the aliens, and it's really not. And then you got like what are called the Hyperboreans, and they're even beyond that. And they stay in some type of central nexus point of magnetic energy, as if, and so here comes the whole Flat Earth Brigade and all this weird stuff. That somehow because we're in a vortex point, or there's vortexes everywhere, and that energy sinks space-time into a state of timelessness, basically, or links multiple areas of space-time together in this, this material grid, that in the center of where we're at, or at least somewhere, there's a huge magnetic vortex, and in there, it basically stops time, and people that are there, you could say, live forever, or maybe they live for thousands of years. And as well, energy is different. Your mind, the dimensional barrier, if you will, is if there's two planes, and I also talked about this in the previous chat that I'm supposed to publish. Excuse me. Need water. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, drink.
Slow it out.
And place. Does anybody remember what I was saying? Oh, the dimensional grids, and so in these. And that's a little bit complex, but maybe there's two planes intersecting, two-dimensional holographic grids, and when they intersect, we have consciousness. I'll have to go into it, in the other video where it's like hours of explanations. But the idea is, if in those magnetic vortex center points, the plane of the mind and the body become one, then what you would think with your mind would become actuality. It would become materially manifested in front of you instantly, or at least wherever it was to be manifested, in your field, if you will, because there's an abundant energy everywhere. The material and the higher dimensional are merged through the human, and apparently through these vortex areas, these underground tunnel areas, these magnetic mountains, these particular areas that carry this, and all the bases are placed on these areas. And as well, they placed them there because, now here's where it gets weird, somebody made these beings, maybe. If they did, they had to put them back in time, because they found the bases partially built by these other beings when they first arrived there, in the 1900s. And they began looking deep enough. Yeah. And it goes on and on with different types of beings and how that happened. I'm pretty sure it's a temporal mishap with accelerating the evolution of beings, or the mutation of beings that were not supposed to be given a humanoid form in the first place. And that goes into these underground beings and biblical myths and so on and so forth. And so in these areas, I feel like I'm distracting myself again. These other beings,
you did great.
It's timelessness in the center, but I don't know if that means it's a disk or what. I've seen evidence of both. There's a gravitational lensing effect that occurs when you get far enough away, so that a rectangle would look curved like a fisheye lens or something. It happens in the universe. Space-time is curved, so maybe it looks like a dome in a flat disk, or maybe that's what it really is. I don't know. I'm not getting into it, but the idea is each one teaches you about the universe, and it's pretty much two-dimensional ways of looking at the universe. And one is basically a virtual holographic matrix system, if you will, and the other is kind of the material version that our senses tell us. They're two legitimate versions, but they're two different things. Whatever that means, in these areas, there's all these extra dimensional things happening. There's a mountain, that you go into, and time basically slows down. The operatives go in, they live there, they can't come back up, because by the time they come back up, it'll be hundreds of years in the future, and so on. And then there's bases that you can only get through with cloning. Okay, the consciousness comes in. There's no doors. It's cemented in. It's shut. There's no bodies in or out, and so on. Very, very strange situations. But you got these timelessness points, these gateways to eternity in these areas, and there might be apparently something in the center, and apparently that's where we're from. And there's this magnetic toroidal effect that when we're further away from that, like we're swinging into an orbit, our consciousness seemingly slows down and down, and we have not more and more time, but it seems like it takes more and more to do things, to have experience. But the closer we get to that, it's kind of like the Gravitron ride where the kids get all spun around in the circle and they stick to the walls at the fair. It's like as soon as you get to the center, once you're in the center of that, you're in the nexus, and every angle that takes one complete rotation to experience on the outside happens simultaneously, instantaneously, all at once in the center. So that effect on consciousness, on your body, your mind, it's what people describe as these heavenly realms and so on. And apparently we're in it right now, but we're swinging around in this projection that's slowing things down, and it creates the feel of a physical universe that we're in right now, which is interesting. To wrap it up, there's a higher dimensional core of infinity in the center. On the outside, there's a physical universe where people are walking around and driving cars and stuff.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good. So, we have about, I don't know, half an hour, less than half an hour left. So, where did you want to go? We've already get into celebrity coding. When I said on the human level, are they replacing certain people in power positions with clones? What is the purpose of that?
If you really go there, so welcome to the cloning conspiracy. It was discovered.
Yeah.
It was explained, and this might be a deception, but that we found clones first. We didn't make them first. We found them. That somebody was infiltrated.
How did we find them?
Because okay, so would you realize if somebody cloned somebody you worked for your entire life, and you had been in mind control situations to the point where you basically can judge each other's intents from the outside, and you can judge other people. Now, if somebody clones them. Okay, the idea is the AI can't create good humans, and neither can some of these other groups, which were apparently vampiric humans that were subjugated by this nanite form that turned them into tall, autonomous, emotionless beings who began, apparently they even cloned what are called these Pleiadians, and they make funny gray-looking forms because they can't get the genetics right, and they're just like absent-minded drones. It's basically, it's literally like... I don't know, your dog gets cloned, he comes back looking like, the, what was that TV movie back in the day with the animals that came out of the grave, they came alive? Pet Cemetery, it's like that, and you're just like, well, Buffy, what are you, and they it's like, it's not that they have no idea, it's that they don't comprehend what human is. So their emotional sense, their cognitive sense, it's obvious, but then that makes it even more creepy, because you also, you have to take measures to keep them out, and that's where a lot of this comes from. Okay, how do you figure out whether a person is human or not if they're biologically human? How do you find out what a soul is? How do you differentiate? That's the study of the occult. That's the study of the higher dimensions. It all comes together in one. It's all happening all at once. And so where was I going with that? You wanted to know...
Like who's being replaced and why?
Okay, so here...
That was just
Hillary.
human level. Yeah.
Here it goes. So we found that. And then it was discovered that basically all major groups were infiltrated and primarily operated by cloned or droned individuals whose consciousness was regulated by a cybertronic system, an AI system. And this is a process that has been happening apparently since the beginning. And the way it was explained is that anyone gets into power. I was also talking about this. I don't know if I recorded it. But anyone that gets into power is eventually confronted in the astral, out of body, in dreams, emotional, whatever it is. They're confronted by these gatekeeper entities, these like Agent Smith beings, and they're pushed into working for them and with them. And if this happens through mind control, all types of stuff. And then the height of that is that the person could be replaced, literally genetically cloned, and it's not them. And this has been going on since the beginning. It was basically discovered. And once we found out how to do that, more or less, it's been used for every individual that could be a target, period. To the point where everyone on TV that you see is the cloned version. Now, whether they're operating from another location into that clone and you're seeing the person in an avatar, or whether the original is gone, or whether they're insane completely, or whether a thing is guiding the body. I don't know, but I do know others know, and I know it's all tracked, monitored, and that's how it works. And I know that at different times in the situations, everybody I've seen go through some sort of one version of all of that, from mind control to cloning to so on. It's just, all you need is genetics. And they're all doing it. And it's been going on since long ago. You look into the past, you'll see carvings, statues, paintings of celebrities, royalty popping back up, so on and so forth, their body jumping. And the issue with the soul is that the soul has to be transferred before it was transferred, and with those who are basically using artificial methods, they kind of turn into an animal, if you will, and that's pretty much how there's degradation from that. I did go into a much deeper explanation for that in another video, which will hopefully will help people. Excuse me again.
Wow. Go ahead.
And so
Everything's fine.
It's just been going on. Just to sum it up, that's what's going on. Look into it more, you'll get weirded out because it's been royalty throughout the beginning of time. It goes so deep. Basically, they had advanced technology back in the day, hundreds of thousands of, not even hundreds, but like thousands of years ago.
Right.
While we still in recorded history, and they had access to electrogravitic devices, cloning, consciousness technology, so on and so forth, but they couldn't disrupt the timeline, so there's all this, secrecy and so on. And it was used for the strangest of reasons, basically personal desires. And that aspect of it that we're seeing pretty much everywhere now has gone on in the dark since the beginning of history, the beginning of time, which is why it is defined, if you're going to define things and use legitimate definitions, as an experimental society, or actually a collection of genetic experiments that have been ongoing. And the idea that I also forgot is, with the end of the contract, it means it's the end of the experiment. But with the end of the experiment, we have to make a decision. We have to choose where we want to go, how we want to live, who we want to be, and that's basically the previous video, which I didn't fully release, but the separation of bloodlines, the separation of souls, basically, into our distinct eternal wavelengths and formats. And the goal is to be able to go in any wavelength and format in the universe, so that we're not kind of stuck in one or the other. And at that point, you're a higher being, if you will. You can navigate throughout any plane, place, time, and so on. And there are beings that can do this. Little guys that look like floating around Buddhas or Zen meditators that the government basically can't control and they can't do anything with, and they kind of float through that electrogravitic soul fence. But collectives are harder to remove. One person can fit through the fence, but then getting an entire bloodline out is more difficult. I distracted myself. I have no idea where that started.
That's okay. So are we trapped in this on this planet, or in this solar system?
So,
or you're saying that people are getting outside of the system?
Yes, these Zen meditators, these beings and apparently there is something about this Christ consciousness, or the Christ beings and beings in the past, and basically a cosmic, if you will, or maybe a spiritual force, a coalition to liberate humanity. That is all the basis for a lot of this, and it goes to the ancient past, which has to do with time operations, and it's very difficult to understand and accept, so that's why it's coming out a little bit later. Apparently the grid is down, but yes, there are these beings who basically reject the system, but they said that you'll only see like one or two of them. You don't see like people everywhere, and you don't see like entire bloodlines, families. It's as if one human is stuck here, then the universe will eventually be, taken over. But if humanity liberates themselves as a part of this whole system, then the whole system is liberated. And that's supposedly already happened. The future has been, aligned, and we can see it as we're coming to it as well. It's not, you can't force something to happen, so you can't, with the viewing tech and things like that. And so I think. I'm sorry, I got distracted. So we're, as far as, so imagine the consciousness or the virtual signature of an NBA player on a PlayStation basketball game, and then imagine taking that guy and putting him in a NASCAR racing game. It doesn't happen. It doesn't work. So we might be in a plane-based virtual system, a construct that the human brain eventually it basically does, it projects, it defines, and therefore projects and creates internally from the brain. We think we're in the universe, we're in our brain, and it's a kind of complex interface. We're not necessarily trapped, but it means you wouldn't expect a basketball player to hop in a NASCAR driving game and go, right, it doesn't make sense. But what it means is that the players beyond the physical system are the ones that actually go from the PlayStation game to the other room where there's an Xbox game and so on. By aligning ourselves down here with the higher self, but I don't want to get into describing that because it can be so vague and things like that. Basically, navigating your temporal signature to reduce entanglement so that by the time you reach a fulcrum of experience, a simultaneity, an experience of a coalescence of all your energy into a oneness experience or so on, that there won't be anything holding you back, because whatever you're stapled to energetically is going to stop that experience from happening. And it's kind of like you're in your robe in the morning, and you're stepping on the end of the robe, or the strap, the belt that goes around it, and you think like somebody's pulling you down the stairs, like trying to kill you or something, because they're pulling your robe, and then you look down and you realize your foot's gluing you to the floor. And we're kind of doing that when we're not aware of these entanglements, these agreements, these parasitic relationships, these things we're entering into time. So it's as if we're in this fractal recursive consciousness system that takes time to get out of the more you're in it, and so that it's almost like a gauntlet in a way, or simply a gravity well that we're going down the gravity well one end, and it means we're going to have to go back up the other end. It doesn't necessarily mean we're trapped, although then with that instead, there might be people who put a bunch of boulders in the way and kept like kicking people down the well or whatever, and that might be going on. But again, it doesn't mean we're necessarily trapped or that we're forced to be here, but it does mean that lower consciousness will not gain access to multiple planes, which requires higher consciousness, knowledge of the multiversal between dimensional places, just like there's extracellular or intracellular fluids and things like that. To get into that extracellular or intracellular space-time fluid, we have to use higher consciousness, and in other terms, the ego, the heavily mended with illusory material desires version of ourself, just like the ego through the eye of the needle, that doesn't pass through the vortex that the heart creates, and so it can't go anywhere. But the challenge is going, I'm dead, I'm just stuck here, it's a torture, it's not what it is. It's like a dream. You wouldn't stay in your dream and go, well, I can't stay here. This feeling I have in the dream, when I wake up, I'm going to be in a body feeling, and it's not the same thing. It's like it died. You wouldn't sit there and stay in dreamland forever and try and never wake up and get back to what you were doing there. So when people look at it this way, it's kind of, it's what they're making out of it, and it doesn't have to be that way. But I hope that explained it just a little bit better.
That's good. Sash, do you have any questions or feedback? Or
No, awesome. I can't get it out. Just keep rapping. Just keep rapping.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
No, we love it. We love it. I'm just teasing.
I'm following you. I'm tracking you. I'm learning. I'm just want to shut up and listen to you talk some more. So just, you've got so much wisdom. You're blowing my mind, bro.
Thank you. I could talk about anything, and you can bring things up, and as well the difference between consciousness or data, information, knowledge, wisdom, and consciousness, self-awareness, and the soul level is all basically that's the wheel of different frequencies that make up our experience. But I don't want to get all abstract into that. You might like it though.
Oh yeah, but just give us a summary. Give us a summary of that one.
I can't really. I'll go into it a little bit. It's part of this like in-depth conversation I've been having over a couple of days. It's really it's kind of a secret, because once you get it, you kind of understand. It has to do. This is the part. It was in the mind and the soul and the cloning and the issues with teleportation and cloning and what isn't there. That was the basis of the talk, and it talked about it. It's the basis as well, though, when you get this up for reality. It's about the difference between consciousness as biologically generated holographic imagery, if you will, that your brain creates, which is basically an AI system that scans the environment and ensures your survival. It's like the thing, this is how I described it in the video, that the vision of Terminator, when it scans the environment, you see all the readouts and it's putting tracking boxes around all the faces and scanning them for an environment or a target, and it's measuring the variables. That's what our brains are doing, from perceptions to depth to minor abstract senses and awareness, cognition. It's happening automatically, and that's because it's designed to pay attention to the situation we're in physically and simply render that safe enough for us to continue doing whatever we're doing. We're not supposed to be in that sense 100% of the time. That's the part that doesn't go through the eye of the needle. That identity, it doesn't transition out. It's virtual signature of a person's soul. The difference between that is, and I'll go on a tangent, but it'll help explain the angle here, is that then you have, so what transfers when you have, say you have a good person, right, or what you believe is, and then you have a clone of them. Is it really them? And then what will they feel? So the idea is that in a brand new clone, it's literally a baby grown into an adult. There's no traumatic neuronal stress of any kind, oxidization, anything. It's maximal, everything's to the tip top, highest experience. It's basically like a drug. And as a result, the people that weren't prepared or guided through some of these systems, they devolve into basically an animalistic type of form based entirely on desire, and it can get really, really strange and abstract, demonic, if you will, or just weird, perverted, or whatever. But as well, like animalistic, like it's almost like it's made to do it, or it's dissolving, going to a low level. So it means that virtual consciousness is not what gets changed over, because that's what develops as your personality over time as a result of trauma and perceptual rendering and shaping basically a mutual agreement on reality consensually with the others in our environment, starting with your family through developmental psychology and things like that. And that's the personality. That has a score of how many mistakes you've made throughout your life, and it's going to basically fill out how things are gonna turn out. More or less, it's the development. This is exactly where it went. Is how I described it. It's the development of the conscience, and the conscience is an individual signature related to wisdom. Once conscience is high enough and there's a merge, you develop wisdom. Wisdom can't be erased. Conscience can be overridden, especially if the person is drugged and stupid enough because they've been cloned. And so then you have these individuals that would not do certain things, and they're put into these systems, and they basically, their consciousness is erased because it didn't transfer through. But the soul awareness could transfer through because it's connected to genetics, but at that point it could basically be in a dormant state, and there's what happens is a droning. If the soul doesn't transfer, the consciousness sticks, they develop as a secondary life form, if you will. The soul vacates the body, and it's a soulless clone that has no human aspect, if you will, as far as the higher sense. And so it's a loss of conscience, it's a loss of what you could say wisdom. That the original brain develops over time. This tells us that signature is conscious, it's virtual, it's designed by the brain as a biological projection. Then you have the soul level underneath that, which is inborn memory, meaning it develops over time and you can't forget it as well. It's from beyond time and space, from other parallels, your ancestors, it's your genetic memory. Then you have this combination between the two to develop knowledge and self-awareness from that to achieve wisdom, which will generate safety and a continuity of the same, and into the highest fulfillment, which is when you pass that on to others and give others the power to free themselves. Without the soul connection, which I'm trying to describe that part, but it's connected through basically the listening of the consciousness, the system guided by the feeling and the intent. When that is lost and it's basically artificial or it's completely desire-based, there is a loss of self-awareness because that's an automated system. It's just a computer taking over, even if it's a biological fat, lipid, made brain construct, whatever. It's just like an animal system. When you basically overcome that, you say no to evil, so on, it generates a self-awareness because that's the self taking control, because it's not the material forms and the biology and the knocking together of electrons and so on to make the automated things that are going to happen continue to happen because they're happening anyway. That's the automated form. It makes whatever's happening happen anyway, which is also why a lot of these systems were designed to get the same responses so that they could make excuses for themselves acting that way, because it's kind of like they're trying to cover up their own bad behavior. And it's a big, complex thing, but that's how it connects with spirituality, and that's how the soul, being some form of intent and feeling and knowing beyond cognitive ability, is the part of you that lives on, and you have to get your conscious system in a routine that builds enough integration of that intent, that self, materially present here, with the eternal self on the soul by listening to the feeling, and ultimately the mind being checked by the heart permitting it, because the heart can't force it, and then you have this flourishing of energy in a certain direction because you're pulling it forth through intent, and that's the blossoming of your self-awareness, which is the reconnection, the understanding, the awakening of who you are here materially in a mortal, temporary form with an eternal self that goes beyond all these automated systems, desires, fears, and deceptions, and so on. And it's a system that uses entanglement with all these biological tricks to do that. And the biggest thing might be that it's been happening since the beginning of time, and we found ourselves in one of those to begin with, if you will. They started a artificial dimension, and they cloned everybody, and they come up to the bases, and they go, what did we do to history? What did we do to the fractal universe? Because now what we did down there influenced all of time, everywhere, always. And we come out and we figure out that this surface level is one big cloning facility. That's kind of like a trippy way to look at it, but it's kind of how it works. What you do in the center, where the most power is it cascades throughout the fractal reality and alters every facet of it. And that's pretty much kind of how it happened with time and with space. And but it's also artificially sustained, meaning once those systems stop pulsing those future or past events, anchoring this as an artificial dimension, it basically it falls away. But then we have to be able to ride that wave as well, because imagine that if we're trying to wake up and go through all this, and all of a sudden as a civilization we're jumping through dimensions, which I believe, if you believe it, maybe that's what we just have done with the so-called Mandela effect or Mandela effect and so on. I know we're running out of time here, and that was a little rambly, but that's you
did great.
It's so right on. When you get the deception, the whole thing falls away.
Right, it's mental. It's a mental game. It's like Bruce Lee said. It's all mental. Defeat the illusion, defeat the fear of your enemy, and you've defeated the enemy. The enemy is not the object; it's the fear. It's the illusion involved. Yeah. Shout out Bruce Lee.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And there's better there's a better way to explain that mind, conscious, all that. It goes way deeper, but that's the gist of it. Some people will get it. Some will look deeper into it, and so on. Thank you.
Wow.
And where did you get all this information? How did you learn all this stuff? How did you figure this all out? Just from reading or observation?
I developed it over time. I most of the stuff you read these days is kind of messed up. It's from direct experience.
Right.
When people say there's something in the woods that goes rawr and does something weird, I go out to look for it, and it went rawr and yelled at me. So it's just how it is.
And you still are in the secret space program?
It's difficult to describe what that even is, but once a person is involved in one of these programs for life, that's just how it works. It's two civilizations at play here, so none of this is temporary. But as well, it doesn't mean what it. I'll say it doesn't mean what you think it means.
Okay.
We'll go into that.
We're almost out of time. So, tell us about your YouTube channel. How many YouTubes do you have there? And about your websites. How do people reach you?
All right. There's just there's two YouTubes, but one I'm kind of left aside for more, higher level productions. The Unveiling of the Hidden Knowledge, and then there's the Aug Tellez YouTube, which is the primary one. I'm trying not to turn it into a vlog or a blog, but some mix of that is the best way to get this information out, because I simply like speaking with people, and it's hard to speak to myself, so it's like I need to do more of these. The blog has been there. It's been a little slow on the blog, but as well, I think there's over 1,000 pages or maybe multiples of that. So there's enough information there, to get your panties in a bunch. Excuse me. And so yeah, I got like 4 or 5 hours backlogged, but I don't know. I just need to put it out there anyway. People like it. I like people. People like it. It's all cool. Everything's good.
It's all cool. Everything's good. Okay, good. Well, we'll definitely have you back. There's a lot more to discuss, and there's the end of the show. Thank you, everybody, for coming to Stargate the Cosmos. That's been Aug Tellez and Sasha. That's an aloha and from that patron.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting.
Benefit from no ATM fees nationwide with a Columbia Bank Advantage Plus checking account. Use any ATM anywhere nationwide for total convenience. Make any ATM your ATM. For Advantage Plus checking, receive credit up to 10 surcharges or $30 per statement cycle, whichever is less at domestic ATMs not owned by us at charge of transaction surcharge. Maximum rebate of $360 for 12 statement cycles. All offers are subject to be withdrawn at any time. Member FDIC, count on Columbia.